Across the universe, there's been a concept that supersedes trivial matters like time and space. One constant, one thing that has held everything together, kept things in line, shown that which was forgotten. Lists. The Ten Commandments, Martin Luther's wet and wild wacky Catholic call-out, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the Seven Deadly Sins, and, most importantly, WatchMojo's top 10 sexiest women in anime. This channel is not a list, but this video is. So let's make sure to establish some good ground rules before I give you the top 10. I took a bunch of categories and I gave them weighted modifiers. So, if a boss has a lot of neat mechanics with a complicated moveset, that's going to be worth double points compared to how nice the arena would fight them in. That's just times 1.25 points. We score every category from 0 to 5, 5 being the best, except the uniqueness category, where 0 is the best. Then we add them all together, outputting our score. We take that score, times by 100, compare it to the others, and the tier list is made. The tier list goes down a peg every 500 points, and the highest possible points a boss could get is 4,760. There's a link in the description to see all 90-something bosses ranked. Also, let's just stress this bit. This is me subjectively scoring every boss in the game as best as I can. It's all in good fun. If you think Soggy Dog deserves a slightly higher score than Greg the Ferocious, then that's your opinion and I can't do anything about it. I think we should agree, however, that they are pretty close to where you expect them to be. Tier FU. A tier that goes solely to see the Scaleless' first encounter with negative 1,400 points. You might think that it is slightly harsh that an invisible boss that instantly kills you and removes all your soul's humanity and who teleports you to a prison will be rated right at the bottom. Oh wait, it's a completely fair thing to do! Whoever at the design team thought to punch a player with a fake out boss fight should have been fired. From a cannon. Fuck you. Tier Z are bosses that had no right to be bosses at all. Through possibly a collective hallucination or bout of mass incompetence at the workplace, somehow Capra Demon and Bed of Chaos were slipped into Dark Souls 1. Uninspired, unfair, boring, and a chore to fight. These two can fight for the throne of Tier ZZZ, but we all know we wouldn't want to watch that boss fight, would we now? Tier F goes to bosses with a glint of something inside them, but just weren't given enough effort to let shine. The Prowling Magus and Congregation is an interesting idea, to have two miracle casters fuck you over as you try and reach them through a swarm of their worshippers and pews, but they're just too easy. Tier F feels like having the tiniest sliver of steak, and the rest is luncheon. What a shame. Tier E feels a bit like Tier F, but with a bit more hope inside. Take Pinwheel for example. Interesting design, interesting mechanic, interesting arena, and then he dies in 3 hits, and the boss fight is over before he's barely had a chance to start. Oh dear. Tier D is home to the semi-competent. These bosses aren't bad, per se, but just fell short of what could have been. The Pursuer is generally an okay designed boss with a good arena, but is repeated constantly throughout DS2 with the same moveset each time. He lacks uniqueness, lacks something to make him great. And so, he's just a boss fight that you don't hate. I still love you though, the Pursuer. Tier C, the layer of the okays. Everything about these bosses is okay. Okay design, okay mechanics, okay soundtrack. What rhymes with C? 2.5. These bosses are perfectly average, and if you like them, that's okay. Yorm the Giant is a boss fight with some good lore, he looks cool, and his soundtrack is nice. And then you attack him, and you realise that he takes basically no damage. And then you pick up the Wind Sword and the fight is trivial. It's still cool to take down the giant with a Wind Sword, but, you know, it could be better? Tier B belongs to bosses that do great. Everything about them is great overall, and they are the highlights of a Dark Souls playthrough. Vort is an early boss, and relatively easy, but his character design is interesting, he introduces a frostbite status effect, and he's just plain fun to fight. Tier B gets a pat on the back and some kind words. They did good. Tier A, the tier given to the honourable mentions. If you think any of the A-listers actually deserve to be in the top 10, then you definitely have an argument. They're staying here though. Tough shit. Aldrich is a magic caster that teleports, casts gigantic arrows, casts arrow rain, uses fire, has a halberd, and so on. An extremely varied moveset with an interesting design and backstory. That's what Aldrich is. And so, any boss with a high amount of effort and imagination deserves a spot. Well done, From Software. And now we move on to the top 10 best bosses in all of Dark Souls. These bosses, across the board, deliver the finest From Software can provide. Number 10. At number 10 we have Champion Gundyr. A great challenge coupled with one of the prettier boss arenas of Dark Souls, along with a varied and fair movement and one of the best soundtracks in the game. If I could give a higher challenge rating than 5, then Champion Gundyr would be even higher on this list. If you want a good fight in a modern Dark Souls, you'd be remiss not to fight Champion Gundyr. Number 9. Number 9 gives us Iudex Gundyr. Despite this interesting arena at daytime, the Black Dragon at Phase 2 just barely gives Iudex a slight advantage over his stronger counterpart with a better gimmick and character design. He's the best tutorial boss in the Dark Souls series, hands down, and for that, number 9. Number 8 is Manus, Father of the Abyss. A tough call between him and the next spot, while Manus lacks in arena design and music, he makes up for in everything else. A beautifully challenging fight with one of the coolest designs Dark Souls 1 gave us with all of its eldritch abominations. Still a bad game though. Number 7. It wouldn't be a top 10 list without Gwyn taking one of these spots. Despite a somewhat weak fight due to the simple moveset and the ability to cheese with parries, as well as a moderately okay arena and zero gimmick, I'd be a fucking monster if I didn't say how well designed Gwyn is emotionally. Gwyn barely takes above Manus by a few points at number 7. Number 6. At number 6 we have the Abyss Watchers. With an amazing soundtrack, varied moveset, great gimmick with the clones, and a great challenge for mid-game players, it's really hard to go wrong with a boss that does everything great across the board. A well-deserved spot at number 6. Number 5. Sister Frieda takes number 5, and I'd be stupid not to give it to her. When you have a DLC with basically one boss, it better count. And it does, with 3 fucking phases worth. Her design lacks, but her mechanical prowess is as tight as a knot. No wonder why she's one of the best. Number 4. Now we're getting to close margins. Lothric and Lorraine have an interesting design, narrative weight, a complex and varied boss fight with both teleportation and resurrection. When you put a miracle caster and a sword fighter as a boss duo, you are gonna get a great result. Number 3. Slave Knight Gale is a beautiful capstone to the Dark Souls series. An absolutely amazing boss with flowing attacks that combine together, it almost feels like you're dancing together at the end of the world. One of the best soundtracks Dark Souls 3 can give. Gale misses the top spots by having a boring arena and no gimmick. Don't feel bad about that though. The next one coming up only got higher by 50 points. Number 2. The Nameless King has 2 boss phases that are both stunning to behold. At the end of a strange optional area, you ring a bell and fight the Nameless King under a giant storm, literally standing upon clouds as you do so. His design is amazing, both visually as well as his combat. Everything about the Nameless King was fine-tuned to create an unforgettable fight, and that's why he's here. However, there is one more. One boss so strong that I had to give them a separate tier just for how strong they were compared to everyone else. The distinguished double S goes to... number 1. Drumroll please. Thanks. Da 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 da! It's Ornstein and Smough! Yeah. No, it's not. Soul of Cinder. Scoring 4 perfect 5s and a 4.5 as well, Soul of Cinder went ahead of second place by 400 points. Soul of Cinder is the final boss before the ending, the very last thing standing between you and your goal. An absolutely beautiful arena of swords, flowers and ash with that fucking skybox staring down at you. Pair that with a disgustingly varied moveset of miracles, pyromancies, sorceries and weapons, as well as that gut kicker with the soundtrack of Phase 2. Did you know? Gwyn's fight music is composed by Motoi Sakuraba, but the composer for Soul of Cinder Phase 2 is another composer called Yuka Kitamura. Huh, the more you... What is bad about Soul of Cinder? Nothing. Well, his character design is anything to write home about, but number 1 goes to them. Well deserved, Soul of Cinder. So, it's no use prevaricating about the bush. Why the hell are Iudex Gundyr and Champion Gundyr both S tier? Seriously? A tutorial boss is better than Artorias? Well, yes, they both are. At least in my eyes. I do need glasses, so these eyes ain't perfect. I could have probably wiggled them down to A tier if I wanted, but I didn't, so there. But, just for fun, let's overanalyze the fuck out of Gundyr. Every single move he makes, his design, his arena, everything. We'll be using the weakest character I can possibly muster, Krungslorp, the Seer. At level 1 throughout the entire game, how well will Krungslorp fare against the unrelenting power of Gundyr? Let's find out together. Gundyr is a really strange character within Dark Souls 3. Despite being the first boss and never being mentioned by the other characters, and never talking, is a surprising amount of depth and neat detail given by the developers. What I'm about to recount is a theory given by Reddit user ShortchangeParamecia, which I wholly agree with and I presume is the closest to developer intention. Let's begin. Champion Gundyr was a regular undead, imprisoned somewhere, just like the undead of the first game. As he made his way to Firelink Shrine, he found that there was no firekeeper, no fire, and a bell that wouldn't toll. He was alone, in a dark world. As he waited at his arena, the darkness began to corrupt him, shown by his red eyes, and he began to hollow as well. So there's 3 paths to follow here. I'll go down one route, but we'll entertain the others. The first being, Gundyr was bested by the Lord of Cinder, who plunged a coiled sword into him. The second being, you bested him. When you go back in time after Osiris, you take Gundyr's boss soul, depriving him of souls, and making him slowly go hollow. This is a possibility, and I totally can get on board with this theory. Let's go in depth on the third theory instead. What I believe, along with Shortchange, is that Gundyr moments before hollowing, plunged his shrine's coiled sword into him, killing himself. The coiled sword plugged where a hollow's dark sign would be, and thus did not make him go hollow, merely killing him. Keep in mind that an undead can't die in Dark Souls, they only go hollow. The corrupted darkness became a abyss that clung to his back. When you kill him in the past, him being undead simply makes him come back to life later, and the stance at the start is like him bowing to something after failing his mission. He staked everything in the belief that someone would be stronger than him. His title became Iudex, Latin for judge. Gund means battle in Old Germanic, making him literally the judge of battle. Ages passed and finally the unkindled arise from their graves, and set upon besting Iudex Gundyr by releasing the coiled sword from him, the sheath, and giving him life again, as his belief no longer hollowed him. You fight him, and the abyss gets into his dark sign, turning him into a pus of man. You finally kill him, and he bequeaths the coiled sword to you, so you may continue your journey. But, as stated in the opening of Dark Souls 3, the bell tolls when the link of fire is threatened.
When the link of fire is threatened, the bell tolls.
Which it didn't, and Gundyr's halberd implies that he was fated to eternal service, so maybe this was always meant to happen for him, from the very beginning. That was Gundyr's backstory, an undead prisoner like you or I, who was late to saving the world, but gave himself purpose in the belief that one day, someone would finish this task. A true champion. Also, do you understand how difficult Dark Souls lore is? There's literal time travel, time distortion, and spatial distortion. Fucking bollocks trying to make this easy to understand for fucking layman's. Gundyr has a rare trait for a boss. He has a voice. He doesn't talk, however. This gives, at least to me, a parallel to Artorias, another character consumed by Abyss and who failed his task. It's also a good way to communicate exertion with his attacks. Gundyr's armour is an interesting case. We get a tidbit of information that it's ancient and modelled after a former king, showing again the theory that Gundyr almost doesn't fit in the world of DS3. That he's a character who has existed for so long that King existed and was forgotten during the time Gundyr was around and when you awaken. This also gives a lot of mystery to Gundyr. Why was his armour modelled after a king? Was he imprisoned by the king? A knight would usually not have armour that looked like the king or was modelled after the king's armour itself. So what does that mean? Why is there blood on his armour? Did he kill someone? Well, possibly, but the blood actually isn't on Champion Gundyr's armour, but his armour's set after he's defeated. It's the armour you get after killing him. It's his own blood. A lot of speculation you can gather just from 2 words, but there's no way of knowing for sure. I don't agree with the theory that it's a Demon Souls reference though, it feels too vague to confirm. Gundyr's armour reminds me a bit of Horus's armour. The strange helmets and the uniqueness of the two feels like there's a relevance. Could they both be characters that killed to be free? Otherwise, his armour has no cultural background, as far as I can tell. We get this little circle of stone where Gundyr lays incapacitated, showing how long this location has been exposed to the elements. This location being ruined, perhaps a Colosseum based on the circular nature of it. Due to the nature of all the arches, however, it could possibly be an extension to the Firelink Shrine. Gravestones align the outer edges of the entire ruins of Gundyr's arena, a reminder of how many unkindled have existed. Some of these graves have unlit and lit candles, showing that some people have held vigils to those that have died. Cirrus of the Sunless Realms, for instance, dies at her grandfather's grave at the end of her questline. Candles have good thematic symbolism too. The wax represents humanity, the wick represents soul, and fire represents purification and knowledge. At least that's what I'm told from the shady page from a university. There's this gigantic dead tree with its roots bearing down on the arena like a really fucked up hand. Is Dark Souls 3 set during winter, or does the dead tree remind us of how dead the game's world truly is? How even such a grand tree can become something so weak? The roots are barely containing a giant empty coffin. Could this be where Gundyr came out of? Or possibly one of the Great Lords? So many questions. Just two. The right side of the arena has given way to the mountain, showing the beautiful landscape, and showing how precarious and remote the Firelink Shrine is. Finally, the candles at the door on the opposite side remind us, may the flames guide thee. Why does Gundyr have a circle of lit candles around him? In the Iudex fight, there aren't even candles around Gundyr at all. If the candles are around a grave, and you fight champion Gundyr around candles, is his own armour, his body, his grave? The darkness of the sky reminds us of how bleak and haunting the world is without light. But after so much the player's been through to get here, maybe it's better for the world. Special thanks to Quince Prince for helping me with this section, by the way. We start out with a great way to set the tone, a Latin choir. Latin choirs and orchestras are pretty commonplace in video game soundtracks that want to convey grandness in a simple way, and it's effective. Latin is a language that really fits in Dark Souls and Gundyr's themes, moody, dark, and dramatic. It really sets the tone of the fight nicely. You'll notice you'll get it as a short swell right at the start, and then it only comes back for the chorus supported by the brass instruments to create a real sense of climactic action due to the loudness and the bombacity of them. Choirs have a human element to them. It gives the music a sort of personal relationship with the listener, like you're literally listening to a warning of doom and hopelessness. Shh, don't tell anyone, I changed it. I changed the original take to it's this now. Shh. You can really feel this if you've ever listened to Nier Automata's soundtrack. The primary instrument we get during Gundyr's fight is the strings. If you look at a typical orchestra layout, what do you get the most of? Strings. Strings are quite quiet individually compared to something like a tuba, so you require more of them to get the same volume. The strings also blend well together as a section which the audience makes it feel like there's an absolute ton of people playing in perfect unity. This, in turn, makes the whole track get that extra feel of drama. There's a noticeable lack of woodwind throughout, as far as I can tell. Maybe there is some, but I can't hear it personally. I think keeping it simple here makes each element of the piece much stronger as a whole. Woodwind doesn't really get the feel that the composer would want. KISYFI. Keep it simple, you fucking idiot! We'll move on to melody, and I'll directly quote Quince here to make sure I'm not messing up with paraphrasing. The piece itself is just sort of an alternation between the string melody, which builds up to the choral climax, which backs down, rinse and repeat. Both of these sections are in binary form, especially the string melody. After the initial impact of the timpani at the beginning and the choral swell, the cellos and the violas very clearly have a duple meter feel, meaning you can divide the beats into 2 and 4. However, at some point the high strings come in with these little staccato bursts that suddenly make the piece feel like it's in triple meter, meaning you can divvy up the beats into groups of 3. This sort of rhythmic ambiguousness, especially with those creepy staccato strings, can give the listener a sense of unease. It also gives this piece a sense of shifting weight or weightlessness, which is perfect considering this is a boss theme where you're fighting a boss, and I imagine you're going to shift your weight a lot fighting a boss. Harmonically, this piece is in a minor key. This isn't really anything to write home about, as minor keys have been used since early medieval times to give a sense of anger or sadness. This is quite an obvious choice to make if you're writing a piece where you're fighting a boss in a grim and dark game with demons and dead things. I also notice how the string melody is very broad and spread out, so it's basically unaffected by the shift in meter. I guess it sort of represents you as a player while all these creepy things are happening around you, such as the ambiguous meter. When the choir comes in, it really tries to cling to that duple meter feel, while everything around it is in triple meter. Thanks, Quince. Now please return to the Shadow Dimension.
Fetch me their souls.
Gundyr's boss fight has some great music that really shows how talented the Dark Souls team is after 3 games. Gundyr's music sells the tragedy of his character in spades. I just love everything about it. I love how high the tension feels at the ending. Ah, so good. By the way, the wiki doesn't list the moveset properly, so special thanks to Stalriv for telling me every attack Gundyr has. Big jump. If you distance yourself too much from Gundyr, he will leap towards you and stab the ground with his halberd and slowly recover. This tells you to be confident and keep close to Gundyr, and to intimidate you into panicking. Don't panic! The slow recovery means you can make use of the attack to score cheap hits if you don't. The high damage but long anticipation means that players understand that high damage attack takes a while for the bosses to perform. In phase 2, the black goop on him does an extra bite. Kick. Uses a follow-up to his attacks if you're too close. The kick is a quick way to make the player panic if they get too greedy with their attacks. The kick simply tells you to stay vigilant and always be ready for a second attack. The kick seems to happen more likely if you're attacking whilst you're close to him, so this is most certainly a punishment for those looking to cheese. It also tracks, so it's guaranteed to hit you if you don't roll or shield. Can't get lucky on this one. Shoulder bash. Similar to the kick, the shoulder bash is a follow-up attack designed to push the player away if they stay too close. The shoulder bash doesn't track unlike the kick, it's simply a way to create distance and to force a quick reaction. Overhead slam. A follow-up attack, this attack is unblockable yet parryable. This forces a dodge, or for the brave who attempted to parry earlier, a good opportunity. This can also be a stronger version where he digs it into the ground as an extra dirty attack if you're unlucky. Jab. A variety of long pokes to try to get a player who's attempting to move back. A lot of bosses have a bread and butter attack, and this is the bread. It's simple to understand and simple to react to. Horizontal slash. This can be used as a way to chain a combo, or sometimes Gundyr will use an extremely large slash as a way to zone the player. This is the butter of the bread, a very simple to understand attack that forces the player to react in a specific way. Jabs force horizontal dodging, and slashes force, well, not vertical, but you know, forwards and back. Grab. A highly telegraphed attack. Gundyr grabs you at close range and impales you on his halberd, and then flings you away as far as he can. The range given can potentially throw you off the map, but it can help you heal as you now have the distance. And you will want to heal, it's a damaging move. That's every moveset Iudex has. His moves are slightly more lethargic than his champion counterpart, as moveset is almost identical in phase 2. Gundyr uses range triggers to know what follow-up attack is best to use. That is why the shoulder bash and the kick are used when you're close, and the big jump for when you're far away. It should also be noted that Iudex has a lot of intricacies other than the movement. The development team were prepared for every kind of player around. Pyromancers and those with firebombs as their starting gift. Black firebombs?
What a garbage option. Why would anyone ever pick that?
I just shouldn't be allowed to talk about Dark Souls anymore. Someone should just fucking come and stop me before I make another video of myself. Can someone help please stop me talking about Dark?
You'll be happy to know that Iudex Gundyr is weak to fire. And for sorcerers, he's weak to magic as well. He's also weak to lightning for absolutely no reason. Just kidding, it's for New Game Plus players. It should also be noted that Iudex has a lot of intricacies other than elemental weaknesses. A fun thing to note is that every single starting class has the ability to parry with the shield, except the deprived who must use their fists instead. As parrying is something you can learn in the tutorial, it's very good that developers gave a few attacks of Gundyr's the ability to be parried. There's no issues with dying to the first boss, so this can be practiced repeatedly. You can break his poise too. Those that are greedy, yet smart, about their attacks can cause Gundyr to stagger and take extra damage for a short time. This is a good way to reward players that are confident in attacking Gundyr, but still defend well against his attacks. It should also be noted that Iudex has a lot of intricacies other than... yeah, that's enough. My final thing of note is that, despite my personal pet peeve I have with Dark Souls being put back in, 100% physical defense shields right from the start for some classes, you can't just hold shield and block every attack like in Dark Souls 1. You have to react to dodging in certain areas, not just because some attacks are unblockable, but because you lack the stamina to block every attack. I think we covered everything fight-wise. Moving on to the Champion Gundyr version! Champion Gundyr fights faster, hits harder, recovers quicker, and leaves no leeway for his combos. As far as I can tell, there's not many new attacks. A lot of his attacks chain together, and a lot of the combos look pretty similar in style. The only noticeable new move is what happens when he loses a third of his health, which begins his second phase. He has this aura shoot out of him, and then he charges right at the player, dealing 3 hits as he charges, and then dealing a large sweeping attack. This move is absolutely devastating, and for lower HP players can instantly kill them if they aren't ready. He can also stop the ground to knock the player out of focus. Otherwise, I believe that's everything. He's just a tougher tutorial fight, but it's so good, because it shows how much you've improved over the game. And that's what Gundyr is to me, the perfect tutorial boss. And the tutorial is what turns somebody from uninitiated to a true fan. I was like that back in Dark Souls 2, and I owe it for making me love From Software since. I'm sure Gundyr, for new players, astounded them. He's a jack of all trades with his moves and mechanics. His music sets the mood perfectly, and his lore sets the tone for the rest of the game as a story about failure and tragedy with that faint glimmer of hope. I know my video essays usually have a grand overarching theme, but for this I simply wanted to show, just like the Voices protagonist video, just how much detail goes into design, and how much you can take from it if you set your mind to it. There are entire channels simply dedicated to the lore of Dark Souls. They exist because there is a high demand for people who want to understand the things they love, and I truly respect the people who spend hours combing through every texture, model, and design feature to understand as much as possible. So I hope you realise that anyone is capable of understanding something they love. Just because love is complex doesn't mean we should never try to discover it. So discover what you love, and understand why you love it. Have fun! A special thanks to Quince Prince for helping with the music section, and Stalriv and ShortchangeParamecia for the information they post about Gundyr. As always, my work is supported by my generous patrons. For just $2 you can support me too, and get some neat benefits. The $5 tier patrons get their names read out by me. They are Aislinn, I Like the Sexy, Robin Burgess, Cliff Excellent, Siegfried Pincer, Billy a Cowdoy, Tamas Kispita, Jordan Hoxie. Thank you, everyone.